He was dying and had only 3 years left. Then she gave him a reason to live their greatest romance. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. 3 years, Alistair. Maybe less. The words hung in the sterile air of the office like a death sentence, wrapped in medical terminology. Alistair James Vance sat perfectly still in the leather chair, his tailored suit immaculate, his face a mask of composure that had taken 45 years to perfect. Only his fingers betrayed him, gripping the armrest with enough force to blanch his knuckles white. Dr. Thomas Rivera leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped on the mahogany desk between them. They had known each other since their days at MIT, when Tom was pre-med and Alistair was already sketching algorithms that would make him a billionaire before he turned 30. That shared history made this moment infinitely worse. The cardiomyopathy is progressive, Tom continued, his voice gentle but unflinching. We can manage the symptoms, make you comfortable, but Alistair, the muscle deterioration is irreversible. Your heart is essentially shutting down piece by piece. Alistair nodded once, mechanically. He had built an empire on understanding systems, on analyzing failures and implementing solutions. But this was a system failure with no upgrade available. No amount of money, no brilliant engineer, no midnight breakthrough could rewrite the code of his failing heart. How long have I been dying? The question emerged with curious detachment, as if he were asking about stock performance or quarterly projections. Tom's jaw tightened. The damage suggests it started after your mother passed. 8, maybe 9 years of stress-induced deterioration. Your divorce accelerated it. Alistair, when was the last time you actually felt anything? The question struck deeper than the diagnosis. Alistair turned his gaze to the window, where Manhattan sprawled beneath them, a kingdom of steel and ambition that suddenly seemed remarkably small. When had he last felt? His mother's funeral was a blur of obligations. His divorce from Catherine was a relief, the end of a performance neither of them believed in anymore. His father's death before that had been, what? A box to check, arrangements to make, a will to execute. He had become a ghost haunting his own life, accumulating wealth with the passion of someone filling out spreadsheets, breathing but not living, existing but not feeling. I want to do something meaningful, Alistair said suddenly, surprising himself, with whatever time I have. Something that matters. Tom studied him for a long moment, then reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a medical journal. There's a botanist, a research scientist named Petrova. She's theorizing about some rare orchid species in Costa Rica with potential cardiac applications. Most of the academic community thinks she's chasing fairy tales. But, he paused, meeting Alistair's eyes. Maybe fairy tales are exactly what you need right now? Alistair took the journal, his fingers tracing the name printed in small letters beneath a photograph of a determined-looking woman with auburn hair and eyes that seemed to challenge the camera itself. Dr. Lena Marie Petrova. She looked like someone who still believed in things, someone who hadn't yet learned that the world ground down idealists into dust. 3 years, Alistair repeated, the number finally settling into his consciousness like a stone dropping into dark water. 78 seasons, 1,095 days, each one counting down to nothing, unless he made them count for something. He stood, smoothing his jacket with automatic precision. Thank you, Tom, for your honesty. Alistair. Tom rose as well, and for a moment the doctor's professional mask cracked. Don't waste whatever time you have left trying to buy immortality. That's not what makes a life matter. But Alistair was already moving toward the door, the journal clutched in his hand, his mind already calculating. 3 years to leave a legacy. 3 years to prove that Alistair James Vance had been more than just a balance sheet with a heartbeat. 3 years to feel something, anything, before he felt nothing at all. As the elevator descended from the 42nd floor, carrying him back down to the living world, he opened the journal and began to read about a woman who believed in impossible things. And for the first time in nearly a decade, something flickered in his chest that wasn't his failing heart. It felt almost like hope. The rejection letter sat on Dr. Lena Marie Petrova's desk like a tombstone for her career. University letterhead, crisp and official, delivering the death blow in 12 concise sentences. Funding denied. Research deemed insufficiently promising. Budget allocated to more viable projects. She read it again, though she had already memorized every devastating word. 10 years of work, 10 years of field work in some of the most remote corners of Central America, 10 years of data, of careful observation, of theories that could revolutionize cardiac medicine. All dismissed by a committee that had never set foot in a rainforest, never held a living specimen of orchidaceae magnificence, never understood that some truths revealed themselves only to those patient enough to watch and wait. The phone on her desk rang, shrill and insistent. She let it ring 3 times before answering, her free hand absently touching the dirt perpetually lodged beneath her fingernails, a badge of honor from yesterday's greenhouse work. Lenochka. Her mother's voice carried the warm accent of their Russian heritage, softened by 30 years in Boston, but never quite erased. You sound tired. Are you eating? Despite everything, Lena smiled. Yes, Mama, I'm eating. Your father wants to know about the university funding. Should he call the department chair? He still has connections, you know. Professor Emeritus carries some weight. No, Mama. It's done. They've made their decision. Lena closed her eyes, pressing her fingers to the bridge of her nose. I'll find another way. I always do. You are so much like him, you know. Stubborn. Brilliant. Too proud to ask for help when you need it most. A pause, filled with maternal worry that crossed phone lines like an embrace. But even your father learned to accept support sometimes. There is no shame in it, my darling. After the call ended, Lena sat in the gathering darkness of her small office, surrounded by books and specimens and dreams that apparently no one else could see. The university had offered her a teaching position, of course, introductory botany for disinterested freshmen, a steady paycheck, a slow death of the spirit. Her research assistant, Sarah Chen, appeared in the doorway, backlit by the hallway fluorescence. At 31, Sarah still possessed the optimism that Lena remembered having once, before the academic world had taught her that passion was a liability and convention was king. You're still here, Sarah said, though it wasn't really a question. Dr. Petrova, you can't keep beating yourself up over this. The committee doesn't understand what you're trying to do. They understand perfectly, Lena replied, her voice flat. They understand that my research doesn't fit into neat boxes, that it requires patience and faith and a willingness to believe that nature might know more than we do, and they've decided those qualities aren't worth investing in. Sarah crossed the room and perched on the edge of the desk, her expression serious. What if there was another option? Someone willing to fund the expedition. No strings attached. Lena looked up sharply. Who? I don't know. That's the thing. It came through an intermediary, a law firm in New York. They're offering full funding for a 6-month expedition to Costa Rica, complete autonomy for you, all the equipment and support you need. Sarah pulled out her phone, showing Lena an email. The only condition is that the benefactor remains anonymous. That's insane, Lena said immediately. Nobody funds research like that. There's always a catch. Always someone wanting their name on the papers, wanting control of the discoveries, wanting patents and profits, and what if there isn't? Sarah interrupted, her voice gentle. What if someone just believes in your work? What if someone read your papers and saw what I see, what you could accomplish if you just had the chance? Lena took the phone, scanning the email with growing disbelief. The numbers were staggering, more than she had requested from the university, more than she had dared to dream possible, equipment that would make their work not just possible but optimal. Transport, permits, even compensation for the indigenous communities who would serve as guides. It was everything she needed, and that was precisely what made it terrifying. "I don't accept money from strangers," she said, but her conviction wavered even as she spoke the words. "Then meet them," Sarah urged. "The intermediary says the benefactor wants to discuss the project in person. No commitment required, just a conversation." Lena handed back the phone, her mind already racing through possibilities and dangers, hope and skepticism warring in her chest. She thought of her theories, gathering dust while the academic community moved on to safer, more conventional research. She thought of Orchidaceae magnificens, blooming unseen in the cloud forests, holding secrets that could change lives. She thought of her father's words, spoken long ago when she was just a girl with a microscope and dreams bigger than her understanding. The universe reveals its mysteries only to those brave enough to ask the questions that frighten others. "Set up the meeting," she heard herself say. "But Sarah, if this feels wrong, if there's even a hint of exploitation or manipulation, then we walk away," Sarah finished, grinning. "But Dr. Petrova, what if it feels right?" That night, alone in her apartment, surrounded by botanical texts and pressed specimens, Lena allowed herself to imagine it. The cloud forests, the specimens. The possibility of proving what she knew in her bones to be true, that nature, given the chance, could teach humanity how to heal itself. She pulled out her field journal, the leather cover worn soft from years of use, and opened to a blank page. At the top, she wrote a single word: hope. Then, because she was a scientist and skepticism was her religion, she added a question mark, but she didn't cross it out. The restaurant was the kind of place where the prices weren't listed on the menu and the silence was more expensive than the food. Alistair arrived 10 minutes early, a habit formed by decades of business negotiations where every advantage mattered. He chose a table by the window, ordered water, and waited. He had been waiting his entire life, he realized, waiting for his father's approval, waiting for his marriage to feel like something other than a merger, waiting to feel the passion that seemed to drive other people forward with such certainty. Now he was waiting for death, and somehow that had finally made him stop waiting and start moving. The research journal sat on the table beside him, dog-eared and annotated. He had read every paper Lena Petrova had published, most of them relegated to obscure scientific journals that probably had readerships in the dozens. Her theories were elegant, almost poetic in their observation of natural systems. She wrote about plants the way some people wrote about lovers, with reverence and fascination and deep, abiding respect. He saw her before she saw him. She moved through the restaurant with the slightly uncomfortable gait of someone unused to such spaces, her posture defensive, her eyes scanning for threats. She wore a simple dress that looked borrowed or rarely used, and her hair was pulled back in a practical bun that couldn't quite contain its tendency to rebel. When she spotted him rising from the table, her expression shifted to something guarded and assessing. "Dr. Petrova," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Alistair Vance." She shook his hand briefly, her grip firm and calloused. "Mr. Vance, thank you for your interest in my work." Her voice carried traces of an accent, subtle but present, adding a slight music to her words, though I admit I'm confused about why a tech billionaire would care about obscure botany research. He gestured to the chair, waiting until she sat before returning to his own seat. Direct, no pretense. He appreciated that. "My lawyers recommended remaining anonymous, but I prefer transparency. I'm funding your expedition because I believe your research deserves support, Nobody funds science out of pure altruism, she countered, her green eyes sharp. There's always an angle, a patent play, a PR opportunity, a tax write-off. Which one is this? All of the above. None of the above. Alistair leaned back, studying her. What if I simply told you that I want to invest in something meaningful, and your work struck me as exactly that? I would say you're either lying or delusional. She didn't blink. I've spent 10 years fighting for scraps of funding from institutions that pretended to care about science. The moment someone offers me everything I need, I'm supposed to just accept it, no questions asked. Ask anything you want. What do you expect to get out of this? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Alistair could have lied, could have spun some story about investment portfolios or diversification strategies. Instead, he found himself offering truth. I have 3 years to live, he said quietly, a terminal heart condition, progressive, irreversible. I've spent my entire life building wealth and realizing far too late that wealth without purpose is just elaborate scorekeeping. He met her gaze steadily. I want to fund something that matters. Your research could revolutionize cardiac care. It could save lives. That seems like something worth dying for. The skepticism in her expression fractured, replaced by something more complex. Surprise. Compassion. Still guarded, but softening at the edges. I'm sorry, she said, and he believed her. I'm very sorry. Don't be. It's clarifying, actually. Knowing you have an expiration date tends to sort out what matters from what doesn't. He pushed the journal toward her. I've read everything you've published. You're right, by the way. The academic community is wrong to dismiss your theories. She looked down at the journal, her fingers touching it almost reverently. You understood it? The cellular regeneration patterns, the symbiotic relationships with mycorrhizal networks. I understood that you see connections others miss, that you observe with patience and record with precision, that you believe, fundamentally, that nature is wiser than we are, and our job is to listen, not dictate. He paused. I also understood that the current academic funding model is broken, and brilliant researchers like you get crushed by it. For the first time, her guard dropped completely. She looked at him with something approaching wonder, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. You actually read it, not just skimmed, actually read and comprehended it. I have 3 years, Dr. Petrova. I'm not interested in skimming anything anymore. They talked for 2 hours. She challenged every aspect of his offer, probing for hidden agendas and ulterior motives. He answered each question with honesty that surprised even himself. Somewhere during the second hour, they both forgot to maintain their professional distance. She gestured with her hands when explaining her theories, her whole body animated by passion. He found himself leaning forward, genuinely fascinated, asking questions not because he needed to, but because he wanted to understand. When she finally agreed, it was with conditions: full autonomy, all discoveries shared freely, indigenous communities compensated fairly and involved in every decision, no exploitation of resources or people. He agreed to everything without hesitation and watched surprise bloom across her face again. Why do I feel like I'm making a deal with the devil? She asked. But there was a hint of a smile now. Because every cautionary tale taught you that when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. He signed the contract her lawyer had required, sliding it across the table. But sometimes, Dr. Petrova, things are exactly as good as they seem. Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it most. She took the contract, her fingers trembling slightly. Call me Lena. If we're going to be working together, we might as well drop the formalities. Lena. He tested the name, finding it suited her. Strong, slightly exotic, impossible to forget. And I'm Alistair. She nodded, gathering her papers, but hesitated before standing. "This heart condition of yours, is there truly nothing that can be done?" "Nothing proven. My doctor mentioned your research specifically, actually. That's partly how I found you." He smiled without humor. "Ironic, isn't it? I'm funding research that might help others, but came too late for me." "Science is full of surprises," she said softly. "Nature doesn't always follow the timelines we expect. Sometimes miracles arrive exactly when we've stopped looking for them." After she left, Alistair sat alone with the signed contracts and the lingering scent of her determination. For the first time since Tom's office, since the diagnosis, since perhaps his entire adult life, he felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with his failing heart. It felt like possibility, like the beginning of something he couldn't name but desperately wanted to discover. Outside, Manhattan gleamed in the twilight, and somewhere in the distance, thunder promised rain. Change was coming. He could feel it in his bones, in his blood, in the irregular rhythm of his dying heart. 3 years suddenly didn't seem nearly long enough. The helicopter banked sharply over the cloud forest, and Lena's stomach lurched with it. Below them, the canopy stretched endlessly, a living carpet of green interrupted only by occasional outcrops of stone and the silver threads of rivers carving through the wilderness. This was her world, the place where her soul felt most at home, yet arriving here with Alistair Vance beside her felt surreal, like watching two incompatible parts of her life collide. He sat across from her, expensive noise-cancelling headphones covering his ears, his gaze fixed on the landscape below, with an expression she couldn't quite read. Wonder, maybe, or fear, possibly both. His face had gone slightly pale when they hit turbulence, and she noticed him gripping the safety harness with white-knuckled intensity. "First time in a helicopter?" she asked through the headset. He turned to her, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected, absolute terror mixed with exhilaration. "First time doing anything this reckless in 30 years, he admitted. "I've spent most of my life in boardrooms and private jets. This feels alive," she offered, terrifying. But he smiled when he said it, a genuine expression that transformed his entire face. "I can't decide if I'm about to die or finally starting to live." Sarah's voice crackled through their headsets from the co-pilot seat. "Landing in 5 minutes, Dr. Petrova. Miguel says the camp is ready for us." The helicopter descended through layers of mist, the world below revealing itself in stages. First the upper canopy, then the dense mid-story of the forest, and finally the clearing where Miguel Vargas and his team had established their base camp. The moment the helicopter touched down, Lena felt the shift in energy. This was her domain now, not his. Miguel waited at the edge of the clearing, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile as Lena disembarked. They embraced like old friends, because that's what they were. She had worked with his community for nearly a decade, earning their trust slowly, learning their knowledge of the forest with humility and respect. "Doctora," Miguel said, then switched to English as Alistair approached. "And you must be the benefactor Lena mentioned. Welcome to the Cloud Forest, Senor Vance." Alistair extended his hand, and Lena watched him carefully. This moment mattered. Miguel could read people the way she read plants, and his judgment would influence the entire community's acceptance of their presence. "Thank you for hosting us," Alistair said, his handshake firm but not aggressive. "I'm honored to support Dr. Petrova's work here. She speaks very highly of your community's knowledge." Miguel's eyes flickered to Lena, a question in them. She gave him a subtle nod. "He's acceptable. Not perfect, but acceptable." "Come," Miguel said, gesturing toward the camp. "The forest welcomes you, though she will test you. She always does." The camp was more sophisticated than Lena had expected. Alistair's funding had provided weather-resistant tents, portable lab equipment, and communication systems that would keep them connected to the outside world. Yet despite the modern amenities, the jungle pressed in from all sides, a living presence that made itself known through sound and scent, and the feeling of being watched by 10,000 unseen eyes. That first afternoon, as they set up the equipment and organized supplies, Lena observed Alistair struggling with the basics. He couldn't tie proper knots. He didn't know how to set up a tent. He moved through the space like someone learning a foreign language, each action requiring conscious thought and effort. But he didn't complain. He didn't pull rank or demand special treatment. When Sarah showed him how to secure the rainfly, he paid attention and practiced until he got it right. When Miguel offered him work gloves because his hands were already blistering from unfamiliar labor, he accepted them with genuine gratitude. "You're not what I expected," Lena said that evening as they organized specimens in the portable lab tent. "What did you expect?" "Someone who would observe from a distance, maybe visit for a few days and then leave the real work to us." She labeled a sample with careful precision, not someone who would actually participate. "I have 3 years," he said simply. "If I'm going to understand what we're doing here, I need to actually do it, not just watch it happen." She set down her pen, studying him in the golden light of the battery-powered lantern. His expensive clothes were already showing signs of wear. There was dirt under his fingernails now, matching hers. The forest was claiming him, little by little, stripping away the polish to reveal something more raw underneath. "It's dangerous out there," she warned. "The terrain is treacherous. There are snakes, insects, plants that can kill you if you're careless. This isn't a boardroom, Alistair. Money and influence don't mean anything to a fer-de-lance viper." "Good," he said, and meant it. "I'm tired of places where money solves everything. I want to be somewhere where I have to earn my survival, moment by moment." They worked in companionable silence after that, the sounds of the forest creating a symphony around them. Howler monkeys calling in the distance, the rustle of leaves as something moved through the canopy, the ever-present chorus of insects and frogs, each species contributing its own note to the endless song. Later, as darkness fell completely and the team gathered around the campfire, Miguel began to speak. His voice was low and rhythmic, telling stories his grandfather had told him, about the forest as a living entity, about plants that held the secrets of life and death, about the responsibility of those who sought to learn from nature. "The orchid you seek," Miguel said, his gaze settling on Lena. "My grandfather called it the heart of the forest. He said it blooms only for those with courage to face their own hearts, to see the truth of what they carry inside." He shifted his attention to Alistair. "The forest is generous with those who approach her with respect, but she demands honesty. You cannot hide here, Signor, not from the forest and not from yourself." That night, lying in her tent, listening to the rain begin to fall, Lena thought about Miguel's words. What truths was she hiding from? The fear that her theories might be wrong, the terror that success might be even more frightening than failure, or something else, something newer, connected to the man sleeping in the tent across the clearing, whose presence had already begun to shift the chemistry of their expedition in ways she couldn't quite name. The rain intensified, drumming on the tent fly, and somewhere in the darkness she heard Alistair cry out. She was on her feet and across the clearing before conscious thought, finding him sitting up in his tent, one hand pressed to his chest, breathing in short, sharp gasps. "Heart?" she asked, kneeling beside him. He nodded, unable to speak. She could see the pain etched across his features, the fear underneath it. Without hesitation, she grabbed his medication from his bag, checked the dosage, helped him take it. Then she sat with him, one hand on his back, feeling the tremors run through him as his heart fought its losing battle. "Breathe," she instructed. "Slow and steady. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it." Gradually, the episode passed. The pain receded, his breathing normalized. But he didn't let go of her hand, and she didn't pull away. "This is what dying feels like," he said quietly. "Just so you know, you're not dying right now," she countered. "Right now, you're breathing, you're here, you're alive. For how much longer? For this moment. That's all any of us have. This moment, and then the next one, and then the one after that." She squeezed his hand gently. "Welcome to the forest, Alistair. She's already teaching you her first lesson. All we ever have is now." He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or realization. The understanding that he had stepped into something far larger than a research expedition, into a journey that would demand everything he had and possibly give him something he hadn't known he was searching for. "Thank you," he whispered, "for being here, for not running." "I don't run from things that scare me," she said. "I study them, I try to understand them, and then I find a way to live with them." She stayed with him until his breathing was steady and sleep began to claim him. Only then did she return to her own tent, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the dangerous recognition of connection forming between them. The forest knew, the rain knew, and somewhere deep in her scientist's heart, carefully catalogued and meticulously observed, Lena was beginning to know it too. Everything was about to change. Morning arrived with startling intensity, the sun burning through the mist to reveal the forest in all its overwhelming complexity. Alistair woke disoriented, his body aching from the unfamiliar sleeping arrangement, his heart tender from the previous night's episode. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was or why. Then memory returned. The forest, the expedition, the terror and exhilaration of still being alive. And Lena, the feel of her hand in his, steady and certain while his heart tried to tear itself apart. He found her already up, crouched beside a fallen log with Sarah, both of them examining something with the intense focus of surgeons performing delicate surgery. As he approached, careful not to startle them, he saw what had captured their attention, a small orchid, barely the size of his thumb, growing in the decomposing bark. "Beautiful," he said, though the word felt inadequate. Lena glanced up, and for a moment her professional mask slipped. He saw concern there, a question about his health that she didn't voice. "How are you feeling?" "Alive," he answered. "Thanks to you." She nodded, accepting this, then returned her attention to the orchid. "This is Pleurothallis, a genus with over 1,000 species. Each one has adapted to a specific microhabitat, specific conditions of light and moisture and nutrient availability. They're so specialized that if their environment changes even slightly, they die." "Sounds fragile," Alistair observed. "Sounds adapted," Lena corrected. "Fragility and specialization aren't the same thing. These orchids have survived for millions of years precisely because they know exactly what they need and don't waste energy trying to be something they're not." Sarah grinned at Alistair. "Dr. Petrova finds life lessons in everything. You get used to it." "I find patterns," Lena said, carefully photographing the specimen. "Nature is full of them. The question is whether we're wise enough to learn from what we observe." They spent the morning trekking deeper into the forest, following Miguel along trails that were barely visible, paths known only to those who had walked them for generations. Alistair struggled with the terrain. Roots conspired to trip him. Vines caught at his clothes. The humidity wrapped around him like a wet blanket, making every breath an effort. But there was beauty in the struggle. Every step revealed new wonders, butterflies the size of his hand, iridescent blue and gold, frogs smaller than his fingernail, bright red and deadly poisonous, trees that stretched upward like natural cathedrals, their canopies so dense that only fragments of sky peeked through. "Watch your step here," Miguel called back. "The ground is..." The world tilted. Alistair's foot found loose rock instead of solid ground, and suddenly he was falling, sliding toward a drop-off that materialized out of nowhere. His hands scrabbled for purchase, finding only loose soil and slick leaves. The edge rushed toward him, and beyond it, a fall of at least 30 feet onto rocks below. Then Lena's hand clamped around his wrist. She had dropped to her stomach, anchoring herself against a tree root, her other hand digging into the soil. "I've got you," she said, her voice strained but certain. "Don't let go." Miguel was there a second later, grabbing Alistair's other arm, and together they hauled him back from the edge. He lay on solid ground, his heart hammering, adrenaline flooding his system with intensity that made him dizzy. "Are you hurt?" Lena demanded, her hands already checking him for injuries. No, I'm—" He couldn't finish the sentence because he was laughing, a sound that bordered on hysteria. "I almost died. I almost just fell off a cliff and died, and I feel alive," she supplied, a hint of a smile breaking through her concern. "Terrified," he corrected, "and alive, both, simultaneously. Is this what you feel all the time out here?" "Pretty much," Sarah said, helping him to his feet. "Welcome to field research, Mr. Vance." They made camp early that afternoon, the close call serving as a reminder that the forest demanded respect and attention. While the others set up tents and organized equipment, Lena drew Alistair aside to a fallen log that overlooked a small waterfall. "We should talk about what happened," she said. "I slipped. You saved me. Seems straightforward. I mean, last night." "Your episode?" She kept her gaze on the waterfall, giving him space to respond without the pressure of direct eye contact. "How often do they happen?" "Increasingly." He picked up a small stone, turning it over in his hands. "The doctors said to expect them to become more frequent and more severe as the deterioration progresses." "You shouldn't be out here," she said quietly. "It's too dangerous. If you have an episode in the field, far from camp, with no access to your medication, I could die," he finished. "Yes, I'm aware. That's rather the point of having a terminal diagnosis. Don't be flippant about this." "I'm not being flippant. I'm being honest." He set the stone down carefully. "Lena, I could die in a New York hospital bed, surrounded by machines and nurses, slowly fading away while doctors manage my symptoms. Or I could die doing something that matters, in a place that's alive and wild and beautiful. Which would you choose?" She was quiet for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I would choose to live as long as possible. I would choose to fight for every moment, every breath, every heartbeat. Because you still believe you have time. You still think in terms of years and decades and long-term plans." He turned to face her fully. "I don't have that luxury. I have 3 years, and they're not guaranteed. So yes, I'm going to take risks. Yes, I'm going to push boundaries. Because the alternative is wrapping myself in cotton wool and waiting for the end. And that's not living. That's just postponing death." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You're going to break my heart, aren't you?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to acknowledge. He hadn't meant to become important to her. She hadn't meant to care about him beyond the professional relationship of benefactor and researcher. But the forest had a way of stripping away pretense, of revealing truth, whether people were ready for it or not. "I don't want to," he said honestly, "but I probably will because I'm dying, Lena. And people who care about me are going to have to watch that happen. Then maybe I shouldn't care." But even as she said it, they both knew it was too late. Whatever was forming between them had already taken root, growing in the dark soil of shared experience and genuine connection. "Maybe you shouldn't," he agreed. "But I think we're both too far in to turn back now." That evening, as the sun set and the forest transformed into a symphony of night sounds, Miguel told them the expedition would become more challenging. The terrain ahead was rougher, the climate more unpredictable. They would need to rely on each other completely, trust each other implicitly. "In the forest," Miguel said, his voice carrying the weight of generations of wisdom, "we are only as strong as our weakest moment, only as safe as our most vulnerable member. We protect each other, or we perish together." Alistair caught Lena's eye across the fire and saw his own understanding reflected there. They had crossed some invisible threshold, moved from professional relationship into something more complex and dangerous. She had saved his life twice in 24 hours, and in doing so, she had claimed a piece of his heart that his dying organ could ill afford to give. But he gave it anyway, because that's what the forest demanded. Honesty, courage, the willingness to risk everything for something real. As the fire burned down to embers and the team settled into their tents, Alistair lay awake, listening to the endless conversation of the jungle. Tomorrow, they would push deeper into the wilderness, following Lena's instincts and Miguel's knowledge toward an orchid that might not even exist. But tonight, right now, in this moment, he was alive. His heart was beating, irregular and failing, but beating nonetheless. And somewhere in the tent across the clearing, a woman who believed in impossible things was probably lying awake too, wrestling with the same dangerous recognition. They were falling, both of them. Not down a cliff face this time, but into something far more perilous. They were falling into something that felt terrifyingly, impossibly like the beginning of love. The rain began during the night, gentle at first, then building to a steady downpour that transformed the forest into a liquid world. Morning brought no respite, only a grey light filtering through clouds that seemed to have settled permanently into the canopy. Alistair woke to find water seeping through a microscopic tear in his tent, creating a small puddle near his sleeping bag. He should have been miserable, cold, damp, far from civilization and creature comforts. Instead, he felt oddly content, listening to the percussion of rain on leaves, the gurgle of water finding new paths through the forest floor. There was something cleansing about it, as if the rain was washing away not just the dirt of the jungle, but the accumulated dust of his old life. "Breakfast is ready," Sarah called, her voice carrying through the downpour. Such as it is. The team gathered under the largest tarp, a motley assembly of dripping researchers and guides, sharing instant coffee and protein bars that tasted like cardboard but provided necessary fuel. Miguel seemed unconcerned by the weather, treating it as just another variable in the endless equation of jungle survival. "The rain will slow us," he said, studying the sky with practiced eyes. "But it might also work in our favor. Some orchids bloom after heavy rains. If we're searching for Orchid Acacia magnificens, this could bring it out of dormancy." Lena's eyes lit up at the possibility. "How long until we reach the site you mentioned, the area where your grandfather saw specimens?" 2 days, maybe 3 with this weather. The trails will be muddy, harder to navigate. We'll need to be extra careful." Miguel's gaze settled on Alistair, assessment clear in his expression. "Are you prepared for this, Senor Vance? There's no shame in waiting here while we scout ahead." "I'm prepared," Alistair said, though he wasn't entirely sure it was true. His episode 2 nights ago had shaken him more than he wanted to admit, but the thought of staying behind while Lena pushed forward into danger was somehow worse than the risk of going with her. They broke camp in the rain, everything taking twice as long as it should have. Equipment that should have been waterproof proved to have vulnerabilities. Hands that were already sore from unfamiliar work fumbled with wet rope and slick fabric. But eventually, they were packed and moving, a slow procession through a world transformed by water. The trek was brutal. Mud sucked at their boots with every step. Slopes that had been merely challenging became treacherous slides. Visibility dropped to mere yards as mist rose from the warming forest floor to meet the descending rain. They moved in near silence, each person focused on the immediate challenge of not falling, not losing their footing, not becoming separated from the group. Alistair felt his heart laboring with the effort, each beat a conscious struggle. His medication was doing its job, managing the worst of the symptoms, but nothing could hide the fundamental truth. His heart was failing, and this kind of exertion was pushing it beyond its limits. Still, he kept going, one step after another. When his legs trembled with exhaustion, he found strength he didn't know he possessed. When his lungs burned for air, he focused on Lena ahead of him, her determined stride never faltering, and let her certainty pull him forward. They stopped for lunch in a small cave, a welcome refuge from the relentless rain. While the others ate and rested, Alistair found himself watching Lena as she studied her field maps, tracing potential routes with fingers that never quite stopped moving, even in rest. "You love this," he observed. "Not just the research, but this, the hardship, the challenge." She looked up, surprised by the observation. "I suppose I do. It's where I feel most authentic, most myself. In the city, in the university, I always felt like I was performing some version of who I was supposed to be. Here, I can just be." "What about fear? Do you ever feel afraid out here?" "All the time," she admitted. "Fear of failing, fear of being wrong, fear that I've dedicated my life to chasing something that doesn't exist." She paused, her eyes meeting his with unsettling directness. "Fear of caring about people who might not be around long enough to see what we build together." The words landed between them with the weight of confession. Neither moved, neither looked away. The rain continued its endless drumming, but inside the cave, the silence stretched and deepened. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for the position I've put you in, for being someone you might care about when caring comes with an expiration date. Don't apologize for dying. That's not something you chose." She returned to her maps, but her voice remained soft. "Just don't ask me to pretend it doesn't matter. Don't ask me to keep my distance to protect myself. I'm not built that way. I know. It's one of the things I—" He stopped himself, the words too dangerous to speak aloud. "It's one of the things I admire about you." But they both knew what he had almost said. What was growing between them, unwanted and inevitable, acknowledged now even if unnamed. The afternoon brought them to a river crossing. The bridge that Miguel remembered was gone, washed away by recent floods, leaving only a fallen log to span the churning water below. Miguel went first, demonstrating the crossing with practiced ease. Sarah followed, more cautiously, but successfully. Then Lena, moving with the careful balance of someone who trusted her body to know what her mind feared. Alistair was last. He stood at the edge, looking at the log that suddenly seemed impossibly narrow, the water below violent and unforgiving. His heart was already racing, and he hadn't even started. "You can do this," Lena called from the other side. "Just focus on the next step. Don't look down." He stepped onto the log. It was slick with rain and moss, treacherous beneath his boots. The world narrowed to just this, the rough bark beneath his feet, the sound of rushing water, the knowledge that a single misstep could be fatal. Halfway across, his heart stuttered. Not a full episode, but a warning, a reminder of its fragility. He froze, unable to move forward or back, trapped in the middle while the world spun around him. "Alistair!" Lena's voice, calm but firm. "Look at me." Not the water, not the log, me. He raised his eyes and found hers, green and steady and absolutely certain. "One more step," she said. "That's all. One more step toward me." He took it, then another and another. Each one a small victory, each one bringing him closer to her outstretched hand. When he finally reached the other side, when her fingers closed around his, pulling him to solid ground, the relief was so intense it nearly buckled his knees. "I've got you," she said, and he realized she was holding him, both arms wrapped around him to keep him steady. "You made it." You're safe." They stayed like that for longer than necessary, her heart beating strong and steady against his chest while his own struggled to find its rhythm. Miguel and Sarah had tactfully moved ahead, giving them this moment of privacy. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair, which smelled like rain and earth and something indefinably her. "Stop thanking me for keeping you alive," she replied, but there was no anger in it. "It's becoming a habit, and habits are hard to break." That night, they made camp in the ruins of an old research station, a structure so overgrown it was barely distinguishable from the forest itself. While the others prepared dinner, Alistair sat with Lena on what had once been a porch, watching the rain finally begin to ease. "Tell me about your research," he said. "Not the scientific details, but why it matters to you personally. What drew you to orchids in the first place?" She was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. "When I was a girl in Boston, my mother had a small orchid on our kitchen windowsill. It was nothing special, just a supermarket variety, but I was fascinated by it. The way it would bloom for weeks and then go dormant for months. The patience it required. The specific care. And one winter it didn't bloom. My mother assumed it was dead, wanted to throw it away, but I begged her to keep it, and I cared for it anyway. Changed its position, adjusted the water, tried different approaches. It took 3 years, but finally it bloomed again. The most beautiful flowers I had ever seen." 3 years, Alistair echoed, the significance not lost on him. "Yes. 3 years of faith in something everyone else had given up on. 3 years of believing that just because something wasn't showing obvious signs of life didn't mean it wasn't alive, wasn't capable of beauty." She looked at him, her meaning clear. "That's what my research is about, having faith in processes that take time. Believing that nature knows what it's doing, even when we can't see the results yet. And you think the same principle applies to dying hearts? I think it applies to everything, to research, to healing, to—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully, "to connections between people. Sometimes the most important things take time to bloom. Sometimes they need specific conditions. And sometimes, even when time is limited, they're worth cultivating anyway." The rain had stopped. Stars were beginning to appear through breaks in the clouds, tiny points of light in the vast darkness. Somewhere in the forest, a nightbird called, its song both haunting and beautiful. "I'm glad I'm here," Alistair said. "Whatever happens, however this ends, I'm glad I made this choice." "So am I," Lena admitted, "even though it terrifies me. Even though I know better than to let myself care. I'm glad you're here, Alistair Vance. I'm glad your dying heart brought you to this place, to this work, to—" She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. "To me," they both thought but didn't say. "To me." That night, as the forest settled into its nocturnal rhythms, Alistair lay awake in his tent, thinking about orchids and patience and the strange alchemy that could transform 3 years from a death sentence into something that felt oddly like hope. Tomorrow they would continue deeper into the wilderness. Tomorrow the real search would begin. Tomorrow he would wake up one day closer to the end. But tonight he was alive. Tonight his heart was beating. And somewhere in the tent beside his, a woman who believed in impossible things was probably thinking of him. Tonight was enough. Tonight was everything. The morning arrived with a clarity that felt almost holy. The rain had passed completely, leaving the forest washed clean and impossibly green, every leaf glistening with captured light. Alistair woke to find himself thinking not about his failing heart, but about the sound of Lena's laughter from the night before, when Miguel had told a story about a botanist who got lost following a rare fern and ended up discovering an entirely new species by accident. He emerged from his tent to find the camp transformed. What had felt like a collection of strangers navigating shared hardship now felt like something closer to family. Sarah was teaching one of Miguel's younger team members about soil pH testing. Miguel himself was showing Lena a traditional method for identifying medicinal plants by scent alone. Everyone moved with the easy rhythm of people who had learned to trust each other's competence. "You look different," Lena observed, as Alistair approached the breakfast area. She handed him a cup of coffee, real coffee this time, rich and dark. "Rested, maybe. Or something else." "I feel different," he admitted, "like I've shed a skin I didn't know I was wearing." He sipped the coffee, savoring its warmth. "How much further to the site?" Miguel mentioned. "If the trails are passable, we could reach it by afternoon." Her eyes sparkled with anticipation, mixed with caution. "But Alistair, I need you to promise me something. If your heart gives you any warning signs, any at all, you tell me immediately. No heroics. No pushing through because you don't want to slow us down. I promise. On one condition," she raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating with me about your health? I'm negotiating about honesty. You tell me the truth about your research. Not the sanitized version you give the academic committees, but the real hope you're carrying. What you actually believe this orchid can do." He met her gaze steadily. "I'm funding faith here, Lena. I want to understand what we're really searching for." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Deal, but not here. When we reach the site, when we have time to talk properly, some truths deserve more than a rushed conversation over breakfast." They broke camp with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role without need for instruction. The trail Miguel led them along was ancient, he explained, used by his people for generations. It followed the natural contours of the land, working with the forest rather than against it. "My grandfather taught me that the forest has its own intelligence," Miguel said as they walked. "It knows where water flows, where earth is stable, where life flourishes. Our job is to observe and learn, not to impose our will." Alistair found himself fascinated by this perspective. His entire career had been built on imposing will, on bending systems to serve human needs. The idea of surrendering to a larger intelligence, of trusting processes he couldn't control, felt both foreign and strangely liberating. The terrain shifted as they climbed higher. The thick jungle gave way to cloud forest, where moisture hung perpetually in the air, and orchids grew not just on the ground, but carpeted every available surface. Trees were dressed in living garments of moss and bromeliads. The air itself seemed to pulse with life. "This is it," Lena breathed, stopping in a small clearing where light filtered through the canopy in golden shafts. "This is exactly the kind of habitat where Orchidaceae magnificens should thrive. The altitude, the moisture levels, the substrate composition." She was already pulling out her equipment, her movements quick with excitement. They spent hours methodically surveying the area. Sarah documented everything with meticulous care. Miguel's team marked promising locations on their maps, and Lena moved through the space like someone reuniting with a long-lost love, touching plants with reverent gentleness, whispering observations into her recorder. Alistair watched her, utterly captivated. This was her element, her passion made visible. Every gesture revealed her deep connection to this work, this place, this possibility of discovery. He understood, suddenly, what Tom had meant about finding something worth dying for. Lena had found it years ago. He was only now beginning to glimpse it. "Come here," she called to him. "I want to show you something." He joined her beside a massive tree, its trunk so wide it would take 4 people holding hands to encircle it. Lena pointed to a small orchid growing in a crevice of bark, its flowers no larger than his fingernail, a delicate cream color with purple spots. "This is Lycast," she explained. "Not what we're looking for, but remarkable nonetheless. See how it's positioned. It gets exactly the right amount of filtered light. The bark provides the perfect anchor. The moss around it maintains ideal moisture. This isn't randoms, Alistair. This is precision. This is a plant that knows exactly what it needs to survive." "Like you," he said quietly. She looked at him, startled. "What? You know exactly what you need. This research, this forest, this pursuit of truth that everyone else dismissed. You're like this orchid, thriving precisely because you refuse to grow anywhere else." Something shifted in her expression, a softening around the eyes, a vulnerability she rarely showed. "And what about you? What do you need to thrive?" He should have deflected, should have made a joke or changed the subject. Instead, he found himself answering with dangerous honesty. "I'm beginning to think I need this place, this work, this—" He gestured between them, unable to name it but knowing she would understand. "Alistair." His name on her lips was a warning and an invitation simultaneously. I know it's complicated. I know I'm dying and you're here to work and this wasn't supposed to happen." He took a breath, steadying himself. "But it is happening. And I don't want to pretend otherwise." Before she could respond, Sarah's voice rang out across the clearing. "Dr. Petrova, I think I found something." The moment shattered, but its fragments remained, glittering in the space between them. They moved to where Sarah crouched beside a fallen log, her face flushed with excitement. "Look at the growth pattern here," Sarah said, pointing, "and the substrate composition. This matches your descriptions exactly. If Orchidaceae magnificens exists, this is where it should be." Lena dropped to her knees, examining the site with intense focus. Her hands moved over the bark, feeling for something Alistair couldn't perceive. Then she froze, her entire body going still. "It's been here," she whispered. "Recently, see these markings. This is where the roots attached. Someone harvested specimens from this exact spot." "How recently?" Miguel asked, his voice tight with concern. "Days. Maybe a week at most." Lena stood, her expression hardening. "Someone else is searching for this orchid, someone who knows these forests well enough to find it." The implications hung heavy in the humid air. Their expedition wasn't as isolated as they had believed. Competition existed, and whoever it was, they were ahead of them. That evening, as they made camp near the discovery site, the mood was subdued. The excitement of finding evidence was tempered by the reality of the race they were in. Lena sat apart from the others, poring over her notes with fierce concentration, as if the answer to who and why might reveal itself in her data. Alistair brought her a plate of food, knowing she would forget to eat otherwise. "Sarah says you haven't taken a break in 3 hours." "I can't," Lena said, not looking up. "Someone is taking these orchids, Alistair. Not studying them, not documenting them, taking them. And I need to know who and why before they strip this forest of something irreplaceable. We'll find out. We'll figure this out together." He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "But you need to rest. Your brilliant mind needs fuel and sleep to function." She finally looked at him, and he saw the fear beneath her determination. "What if we're too late? What if everything I've worked for, everything I've believed in, has already been stolen by someone who sees it only as profit? Then we document it anyway. We tell the truth about what was here and what was taken. We fight to protect what remains." He covered her hand with his. "Lena, you taught me that 3 years can be enough time for something beautiful to bloom. Don't lose faith in that now." She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. The gesture was simple, intimate, grounding. "When did you become the one giving me hope? When you showed me what hope looks like. When you saved my life and then showed me how to live it." He squeezed her hand gently. "We're in this together now. Whatever comes, we face it together." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, and for a long moment, They simply sat in the fading light, two people finding strength in shared presence. The forest hummed around them, indifferent to their fears and hopes, eternal and patient. Miguel approached quietly, his expression grave. "Senor Vance, Doctora Petrova, I have made inquiries through my network. The person taking specimens, I believe I know who it might be." They looked up, alert. "Who?" Lena asked. "There are rumors of a pharmaceutical company hiring local guides, offering substantial money for rare plants, especially orchids with medicinal properties. They are not interested in conservation or research, only in extraction and profit." "Do you have a name?" Alistair asked, though he already felt the cold certainty of knowing. "Croft Industries," Miguel said. "The man leading it is named Marcus Croft." The name hit Alistair like a physical blow. Marcus Croft, a competitor from his early days in tech, someone who had built an empire on aggressive acquisition and ruthless business practices. They had clashed before, and Marcus had never forgiven Alistair for outmaneuvering him in a crucial deal years ago. "You know him," Lena observed, reading Alistair's face. "I know him. He's—" Alistair searched for words that wouldn't sound melodramatic but settled on simple truth. "He's dangerous, not violent, but utterly without conscience when it comes to getting what he wants. If he's here, if he knows about this orchid, he won't stop until he controls it completely. Then we move faster," Lena said, her jaw set with determination. "We find Orchid Acacia magnificens before he does. We document it properly, establish its location, and protect it legally before he can strip it bare." "And if we're too late?" Sarah asked quietly. "We're not," Lena said with fierce certainty. "We can't be." But as darkness fell and the team settled into uneasy sleep, Alistair lay awake, his mind racing, Marcus Croft in the same forest, hunting the same prize. It was too much of a coincidence. Somehow, Marcus must have learned about the expedition, about Lena's research. And knowing Marcus, he would see this not just as a business opportunity, but as a chance to defeat Alistair one final time. The dying billionaire against the ruthless tycoon, with the fate of an undiscovered species hanging in the balance. It would have seemed absurd if it weren't so terrifyingly real. Tomorrow they would search with renewed urgency. Tomorrow the race would truly begin. But tonight, through the thin fabric of their tents, Alistair could hear Lena's breathing, steady and determined even in sleep. That sound, more than anything, gave him courage. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And maybe, just maybe, together they would be strong enough to win. The discovery came at dawn, when the forest was caught between darkness and light, that liminal moment when the world held its breath. Lena had woken early, unable to sleep, and wandered to the edge of camp with her headlamp and field guide. She was searching more from restless energy than real expectation when she saw it. At first, she thought her exhausted mind was creating what she wanted to see. A trick of the light, a sleep-deprived hallucination. But as she moved closer, as her hands trembled reaching toward it, she knew with absolute certainty, Orchidaceae magnificens, real, alive. Blooming in the half-light like a dream made flesh. The flowers were extraordinary, larger than she had predicted, nearly the size of her palm, with petals that seemed to shift color in the changing light. Cream to gold to pale green, with intricate patterns that resembled the chambers of a heart, not metaphorically but literally, as if the flower had encoded the very structure of cardiac muscle into its design. "Alistair," she called, her voice breaking with emotion. "Alistair, come quickly." He emerged from his tent, hair disheveled, shirt only half-buttoned, moving with the urgency her tone demanded. When he saw her face, saw the tears streaming down her cheeks, he ran the last few steps. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" She couldn't speak, could only point with a shaking hand at the orchid growing from the crook of a branch, its flowers catching the first rays of sunrise. She watched understanding dawn on his face, watched him see what she saw. Is that... Yes. The word came out as a sob. Yes, it's real. It exists. I wasn't chasing shadows. I wasn't wrong. He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself collapse against him. 10 years of doubt and struggle and perseverance, finally vindicated in this single moment. She felt his heart beating against her cheek, irregular and failing, and thought about the pattern in the orchid's petals, the biological poetry of it all. You did it, he whispered into her hair. You found it. By the time the others woke, Lena had regained her composure enough to begin proper documentation. Sarah set up cameras and measurement equipment. Miguel's team created a protective perimeter around the site. And Alistair simply watched Lena work, his face reflecting a joy that seemed to transcend his own circumstances. The cellular structure should be similar to other Orchidaceae species, but with unique alkaloid compounds, Lena explained as she carefully collected a small sample, her hands steady now with professional focus. If my theories are correct, these compounds could interact with cardiac tissue in ways that promote regeneration, rather than just managing symptoms. You mean it could actually heal damaged hearts? Sarah asked, her voice hushed with awe. Potentially. With years of research, clinical trials, proper testing? Lena caught herself, her scientific caution warring with her excitement. But yes, that's the hope. That's what I've believed possible all along. Alistair moved closer, studying the flower with newfound understanding. It's beautiful, he said softly, like nature encoded hope into its very structure. Nature doesn't think in terms of hope, Lena replied, but gently. It simply adapts, survives, creates solutions to problems we haven't even identified yet. We're just lucky enough to observe and learn. Then let me rephrase, he said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. You encoded hope into your research. You saw possibility where others saw nothing, and you were right. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken recognition. They weren't just talking about the orchid anymore. They were talking about second chances, about believing in seemingly impossible transformations, about having faith when logic suggested surrender. Miguel cleared his throat delicately. Doctora, we should document the location precisely and photograph everything. If others are searching, we need to establish our discovery officially. You're right, Lena said, reluctantly breaking eye contact with Alistair. Sarah, let's get every angle, every measurement. I want documentation so thorough that there can be no question about when and where we found this. They worked with methodical precision, treating the discovery with the reverence it deserved. Each photograph was carefully composed, each measurement triple-checked, every observation recorded in multiple formats. This wasn't just scientific discovery, it was protection, a way to shield this remarkable find from those who would exploit rather than preserve it. As the sun climbed higher, bringing full daylight to the forest, Alistair felt something shifting inside him. Not his heart, though that continued its irregular rhythm, something deeper, more fundamental. He was witnessing the culmination of a dream, the validation of a decade of faith, and in doing so, he was learning what it meant to be part of something larger than himself. His phone, which rarely had signal this deep in the forest, suddenly chimed with an incoming satellite message. He almost ignored it, unwilling to let the outside world intrude on this moment, but the name on the screen made him freeze. Marcus Croft. The message was brief, almost cordial. Heard you're playing botanist these days, Vance. Cute hobby for a dying man. We should talk about your little flower before things get complicated. You know how to reach me? The implied threat was clear. Marcus knew about the orchid, knew about their discovery, and was preparing to make his move. Alistair looked up to find Lena watching him, concern evident on her face. "What is it?" He handed her the phone, watching her expression harden as she read. "He knows," she said flatly. "How could he possibly know? We just found it ourselves. Marcus has resources, contacts. He probably has people watching us, tracking our movements." Alistair felt old anger stirring, the competitive instincts he thought he had left behind in New York. "He wants us to know he's ahead of us. It's a power play." "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her earlier joy replaced by worry. Alistair opened his mouth to respond, but Lena spoke first, her voice carrying steel he hadn't heard before. "We do our job. We document this discovery properly. We establish legal protection for this site, and we make sure that Orchidaceae magnificens becomes part of the scientific record in a way that prevents any single entity from controlling it." "That could take days," Alistair warned. "Days Marcus will use to his advantage. Then we work faster, smarter, together." She stood, brushing dirt from her knees, her posture radiating determination. "I didn't spend 10 years on this research to hand it over to a pharmaceutical company that sees nature as nothing but profit margins. This orchid, this forest, these communities, they deserve better." Miguel stepped forward, his expression grave but supportive. "My people will help. We know these forests. We can watch for intruders, protect this site. But, Doctora, you must understand. If this man is as dangerous as you say, there will be consequences for standing against him." "I know," Lena said quietly, "but some things are worth the risk." She looked at Alistair as she said it, and he understood she wasn't just talking about the orchid anymore. She was talking about everything, the research, the expedition, the connection growing between them despite all the reasons it shouldn't. She was choosing to fight for what mattered, consequences be damned. And in that moment, Alistair fell completely, irrevocably in love with her. Not the careful, cautious affection he had been developing, not the intellectual appreciation of her brilliance or the physical attraction to her passion. This was something absolute. The kind of love that rewrote the fundamental equations of his existence. The kind that made a dying man want to live forever, if only to spend that infinity watching her chase impossible dreams and make them real. "Then we fight," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. "Together, whatever he throws at us, we face it together." Lena smiled, fierce and beautiful, and held out her hand. He took it, their fingers interlacing with the natural ease of pieces finding their proper fit. Around them, the team prepared for the battle ahead. But for this moment, Alistair and Lena simply stood in the presence of their discovery, hands clasped, hearts beating their separate rhythms, and knew with absolute certainty that they had found something far more precious than a rare orchid. They had found each other, and no amount of money, power, or ruthless ambition could take that away. The war with Marcus Croft was coming, but they were ready, or so they thought. The next 3 days blurred together in a frenzy of activity. They worked 18-hour shifts, documenting every aspect of Orchidaceae magnificens with obsessive thoroughness. Sarah managed the technical side, uploading data to secure servers and coordinating with legal experts back in the United States. Miguel's network of contacts expanded the protective perimeter around the site, ensuring no one could approach without warning. And Lena threw herself into the research with such intensity that Alistair worried she would collapse from exhaustion. He watched her work, marveling at the way she could maintain laser focus for hours, her mind processing complex data while her hands performed delicate sample collection with surgical precision. But he also saw the toll it took, the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was watching, the dark circles under her eyes that no amount of coffee could disguise, the tension that radiated from her shoulders, tighter with each passing hour, On the third night, he found her alone in the lab tent, surrounded by microscope slides and chemical analysis equipment, her head in her hands. "Lena," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, and he saw tears threatening to spill. "I can't get the compound isolation right. The alkaloids are more complex than I thought, and I need more time, better equipment, and—" Her voice broke. "And I'm terrified that Marcus will take all of this before I can prove what it can do." He crossed the tent and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "You don't have to do this alone. You have a team, you have resources, you have me. You shouldn't be here," she said, but without conviction. "You should be resting. Your heart—" "My heart is fine for the moment, and even if it wasn't, I would rather spend my time here with you, fighting for something that matters, than lying in a tent, worrying about when it will fail." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, the gesture intimate and tender. "You're exhausted. When was the last time you slept?" "I don't know. 30 hours. 40. She leaned into his touch despite herself. "There's too much to do, Alistair. Too much at stake. There's always too much to do. That's the nature of important work. But you're no good to this research if you collapse from exhaustion." He stood, pulling her gently to her feet. "Come on. We're going to take a break." "I can't." "You can. The data will still be here in a few hours. The orchid isn't going anywhere tonight. But you need rest. And I need—" He paused, searching for the right words. "I need a few hours where we're not racing against time and corporate greed, where we can just be two people who found something miraculous and want to celebrate it properly." She allowed him to lead her from the tent, too tired to resist. They walked to the edge of camp, where the forest opened to reveal a view of the valley below, a carpet of green stretching to distant mountains. The moon was nearly full, painting everything in silver light. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It is, but I wasn't looking at the view." She turned to find him watching her with an expression that made her heart race. "Alistair, I love you," he said simply. "I know it's insane. I know I'm dying, and you're brilliant, and this is probably the worst possible timing. But I love you, Lena Petrova. I love your passion and your stubbornness, and the way you see miracles where others see data. I love that you saved my life, and then showed me how to actually live it. And I needed you to know that, even if it complicates everything." For a long moment, she just stared at him, her scientific mind probably analyzing the implications, weighing the risks, calculating the inevitable pain of loving someone with an expiration date. But then something shifted in her expression, logic giving way to something more fundamental. "I love you too," she said, and the admission seemed to surprise her as much as it relieved him. "I've been trying so hard not to, trying to stay professional, to maintain distance, to protect myself from the grief that's coming. But I can't help it. You're—" She searched for words. "You're like the orchid. Something rare and precious that I stumbled across when I wasn't even looking. How could I not love you?" He kissed her then, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded with equal hunger. It was a kiss that tasted of coffee and exhaustion and desperate hope, a kiss that acknowledged the limited time they had and celebrated it anyway. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how this ends," he said honestly. "I don't know if I have months or weeks or if my heart could give out tomorrow. But I know that right now, in this moment, I am happier than I have ever been in my entire life." "Then that's enough," she whispered. "This moment, and then the next one, and then the one after that, for as long as we have them." They stood like that, wrapped in each other's arms under the moonlight, the forest breathing around them. Alistair felt his heart beating against her chest, that unreliable organ that had brought him here, to this place, to this woman. It would fail eventually. That was inevitable, but right now it was keeping him alive long enough to love and be loved in return. And that was miracle enough. The spell was broken by Sarah's urgent voice calling from the camp. "Dr. Petrova, Mr. Vance, you need to see this." They hurried back to find the team gathered around Sarah's laptop, their faces grim. On the screen was a news article, freshly published. Tech billionaire's secret agenda, Alistair Vance, accused of exploiting indigenous lands in Costa Rica. The article was devastating. It claimed Alistair had orchestrated the expedition as a cover for biopiracy, that he was stealing indigenous knowledge and resources for personal profit. It quoted anonymous sources, showed photographs taken out of context, and painted Lena as either a willing accomplice or a naive pawn in his scheme. "It's all lies," Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger. "Every word of it. But it's already going viral. Environmental groups are calling for investigation. The Costa Rican government is issuing statements. And the journalist who wrote it works for Marcus," Alistair finished, his stomach sinking. "This is his move. He can't beat us scientifically, so he's destroying us publicly." Lena's phone started ringing, then Alistair's, then Miguel's. The outside world, which had felt so distant, was suddenly crashing down on them with crushing force. "We need to respond," Lena said, already moving into crisis mode. "We need to release our own documentation, show the truth of what we're doing here." "It won't matter," Alistair said quietly, years of business experience teaching him the harsh reality. "Marcus has the resources to control the narrative. By the time our truth reaches the public, the damage will be done. So we just give up." Lena's voice rose with frustration and fear. "We let him win? No, we fight. But we need to be smart about it." He pulled out his phone, already composing messages to his own network of contacts. "I still have some influence, some allies. If we can get ahead of this, if we can turn the narrative—" His words were cut off by the sound of helicopters approaching. Multiple helicopters, their searchlights cutting through the darkness, converging on their position. "Miguel," Lena said urgently, "is that your people?" Miguel's face was grave. "No, Doctora. I fear these are the complications I warned about." The helicopters landed in the clearing with military precision. Men emerged, not armed, but carrying official-looking documents and credentials. The lead figure was instantly recognizable from his photos. Marcus Croft himself, looking every inch the successful executive even in field clothes, his smile cold and victorious. "Alistair," Marcus called out, his voice carrying false warmth. "And Dr. Petrova, I presume. So sorry to interrupt your little adventure, but I'm afraid I have some legal documents you need to see. Seems there are quite a few permits you failed to obtain, regulations you violated, indigenous rights you've trampled. Quite a mess, really." "This is harassment," Lena said, stepping forward. "We have every permit, every authorization." "Had," Marcus corrected. "Until certain concerns were raised about the legitimacy of your funding sources and intentions. Funny how quickly permits can be revoked when proper authorities are informed of potential violations." His gaze settled on Alistair with undisguised pleasure. "Thought you could play hero in your final act? Thought you could leave behind some noble legacy? How touching and how utterly naive." Alistair felt rage building in his chest, his heart rate spiking dangerously. But before he could respond, before he could step forward and confront the man who was destroying everything they had built, Lena's hand found his, squeezing tight. "Don't!" she whispered. "Don't give him the satisfaction." Marcus's smile widened. "Oh, this is precious. The dying billionaire and his pet scientist, thinking love will conquer all. Here's reality, friends. I've secured the rights to this entire region. Any discoveries made here belong to Croft Industries. Your research, your documentation, your precious orchid, all mine. The courts will spend years sorting it out, but by then I'll have extracted everything of value and you'll both be—" He paused, looking at Alistair with mock sympathy. "Well, You'll be wherever dying men go. And your little botanist will be teaching freshman biology at some community college, her career in ruins, remembered only as the naive idealist who got played by the game. The world seemed to tilt. Alistair felt his heart stuttering, pain radiating through his chest. Too much stress, too much anger. His medication was in the tent, too far away to matter. He was going to die right here, right now, watching Marcus Croft destroy everything he had tried to build. Lena's arms were around him, holding him up even as he felt his legs giving way. "Alistair, stay with me. Don't you dare leave me now." But darkness was closing in, and the last thing he heard was Marcus Croft's laughter echoing through the forest that had promised them hope and delivered only heartbreak. Consciousness returned in fragments. The sterile smell of medical equipment, the steady beep of a heart monitor, voices arguing in hushed tones just beyond his awareness. Alistair fought his way toward those voices, toward consciousness, driven by the urgent need to know what had happened, what he had lost. "He's waking up," someone said. Lena. That was Lena's voice. His eyes opened to find her leaning over him, her face pale with exhaustion and tear-streaked, but alive and here and holding his hand like it was a lifeline. "You're okay," she said, her voice breaking. "You're okay. Where?" His throat was raw, the word barely audible. "San Jose, the hospital. You've been unconscious for 36 hours. She stroked his hair back from his forehead with infinite gentleness. "You had a severe episode. Your heart, Alistair, we almost lost you." Memory crashed back. The confrontation with Marcus, the legal documents, the realization that everything they had worked for was being stolen from them. The rage and despair that had triggered the attack. "The orchid," he managed. "Marcus, shh, don't worry about that right now. You need to rest, to recover." But he could see the devastation in her eyes, the knowledge that while she had saved his life, she had lost the battle for her research. "Tell me," he insisted, trying to sit up despite her restraining hand. "Tell me what happened." She helped him adjust the bed, then sat beside him, still holding his hand. "After you collapsed, they airlifted you here. I came with you because I couldn't. I couldn't let you be alone. Sarah and Miguel stayed at the site to try to salvage what they could, but—" She took a shaky breath. "Marcus's team moved in the moment we left. They stripped the area of specimens. They have lawyers claiming prior discovery, fraudulent permit applications on our part, violation of indigenous rights. He's painted us as the villains and himself as the protector of these resources. And the truth is buried under his lies and his money and his influence." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "The truth is that we found something miraculous, and he's going to turn it into a patent and a profit margin, and there's nothing we can do to stop him." Alistair felt rage building again, but forced himself to breathe slowly, to not let his heart sabotage him a second time. "There has to be something, some legal avenue, some way to fight back. With what resources? His lawyers have frozen your funding to the expedition, claiming it was obtained through fraudulent means. My university has distanced themselves from me, afraid of the scandal. Miguel's community is facing threats if they continue to support us. We're isolated, Alistair. Cut off. Defeated." The hopelessness in her voice was worse than any physical pain. This woman who had believed so fiercely, who had maintained her faith through years of rejection and skepticism, was finally breaking under the weight of Marcus Croft's calculated cruelty. "I'm sorry," Alistair whispered. "I brought this on you. My connection to Marcus, my funding, my presence in your life. I've destroyed everything you worked for. Stop!" Her voice was sharp, cutting through his self-recrimination. "Don't you dare blame yourself for his evil. Don't you dare suggest that loving you was a mistake." She leaned forward, her forehead touching his. "I would do it all again, Alistair. Every moment, every choice. Even knowing how it ends, I would choose you. They stayed like that, foreheads touching, breathing together, finding comfort in shared grief. Outside the hospital room, the world continued its indifferent rotation, but in this moment, they had each other, and that had to be enough. A knock on the door interrupted them. Tom Rivera entered, his expression serious but kind. "I'm glad you're awake," he said to Alistair. "You gave us quite a scare." "How bad is it?" Alistair asked, bracing himself. "Bad. The episode accelerated the deterioration. Your heart is weaker than before. You need to avoid stress, avoid physical exertion, avoid—" Tom paused. "Avoid everything that makes life worth living, basically. I'm sorry, Alistair. I wish I had better news." "How long?" The question came from Lena, her hand tightening around Alistair's. Tom hesitated. "Weeks, maybe a few months if he's careful and lucky. The 3-year timeline, that's no longer realistic." The words settled over them like a shroud. Alistair watched Lena process this information, saw the moment she understood what it meant. Not years to fight back, to build something new from the ruins. Just weeks. Just enough time to say goodbye. "There has to be something we can do," Lena said, her voice desperate. "Some treatment, some intervention." "There is one option," Tom said carefully. "Experimental, a new protocol using stem cells and gene therapy. But it's incredibly expensive, not covered by insurance, and the success rate is minimal at best." "I'll pay for it," Lena said immediately. "Whatever it costs." "Lena, you don't have that kind of money," Alistair said gently. "And even if you did, Tom just said the success rate is minimal. I don't care about the odds. I care about trying." She turned to Tom. "How much?" The number Tom quoted made her blanch, but she didn't back down. "I'll find it. I'll mortgage everything. "You'll do nothing of the sort," Alistair interrupted, his voice firm despite his weakness. "I won't let you destroy your financial future for a treatment that probably won't work." "Then what?" she demanded, anguish raw in her voice. "I'm supposed to just watch you die. Accept it. Move on." She stood abruptly, pacing the small room like a caged animal. "I can't do this, Alistair. I can't lose you, not now, not when we just found each other." He wanted to comfort her, to promise that everything would be okay. But he had promised himself honesty, and honesty demanded he acknowledge the brutal truth. He was dying. They had lost everything they fought for, and no amount of love could change those facts. "Come here," he said quietly. She came, sinking onto the bed beside him, letting him pull her into his arms. They held each other while Tom discreetly left the room, giving them privacy for their grief. "I'm so sorry," Alistair whispered into her hair. "I wanted to give you more time. I wanted to see your research vindicated, to watch you prove all those skeptics wrong. I wanted—" His voice broke. "I wanted a lifetime with you, even knowing I only had years. And I got what I needed," she said, pulling back to look at him. "I got to see my orchid bloom. I got to know that my theories were right, even if the world will never acknowledge it. And I got to love you, Alistair Vance, and be loved by you. That's more than most people get in their entire lives." They kissed, soft and sad and infinitely tender. When they separated, Alistair saw acceptance beginning to settle over Lena's features, the kind of peace that comes from surrendering to what cannot be changed. But beneath it, he also saw something else, a spark, a stubborn refusal to go gentle into that good night. "What are you thinking?" he asked, knowing that look. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that Marcus Croft may have won the battle, but the war isn't over yet." "Lena, no! Listen to me." She stood, and he saw the transformation happening in real time, from grieving lover to fierce scientist. "Marcus has the orchid specimens, he has the legal claims, he has everything except the knowledge of what to do with them. The genetic sequencing, the compound isolation protocols, the understanding of how those alkaloids actually interact with cardiac tissue, that's all in my head. and he can't patent what he doesn't understand. What are you saying? I'm saying we still have one weapon he can't take from us, the truth, the scientific truth, and if I can't use it to save your life, maybe I can use it to save others. Maybe I can find a way to make sure that when your heart finally stops, it's not the end of this story. It's just the beginning of something bigger. Hope, dangerous and fragile, bloomed in Alistair's chest. You think you can still make this work? Even without resources, without support, without time. She smiled, sad but determined. I'm a scientist, Alistair. I'm trained to work with limited resources and impossible deadlines. And now I have the most powerful motivation possible. I want your death to mean something. I want it to save lives, to advance knowledge, to prove that love and science and stubborn hope can triumph over greed and cruelty. She leaned down, kissing him with renewed purpose. So yes, we fight. Not with lawyers or money or influence. We fight with truth. And we make Marcus Croft regret the day he decided to come after us. In that moment, watching her transform grief into determination, Alistair knew with absolute certainty that he was seeing the woman who would change the world. Maybe not in time to save him, maybe not in ways that would ever make headlines or win accolades, but she would change the world nonetheless. Because that's what Lena Petrova did. She believed in impossible things and then made them real through sheer force of will and brilliant, beautiful science. I love you, he said, meaning it with every fiber of his failing heart. I love you too, she replied. Now rest. We have work to do, and I need you alive as long as possible. As she left the room to begin whatever desperate plan was forming in that magnificent mind, Alistair lay back against the pillows and allowed himself to smile. Marcus thought he had won. Marcus thought he had destroyed them. But Marcus Croft had no idea what he had unleashed. He had given Lena Petrova something more dangerous than any weapon, more powerful than any resource. He had given her a reason to fight with everything she had. And that, Alistair thought as sleep began to claim him, was going to be his biggest mistake. 3 days after Alistair's collapse, Miguel arrived at the hospital with news that changed everything. He came not as a guide or employee, but as a friend bearing a gift more precious than any orchid, the truth, preserved and protected by those Marcus Croft had tried to silence. Lena was dozing in the chair beside Alistair's bed when Miguel entered. Moving with the quiet dignity that characterized all his actions, she startled awake, immediately alert. Miguel, what are you doing here? Is everything okay at the site? The site is gone, Doctora. Marcus Croft's people have taken everything they could carry and destroyed what they couldn't. He paused, his weathered face creasing with a smile that seemed incongruous with such devastating news. But they forgot something important. What? They forgot that my people have been protecting the secrets of this forest for generations, that we know how to hide what's precious, that we understand the difference between taking and receiving, between exploiting and honoring. He pulled a small cooler from his bag. Before they arrived, before the helicopters and the lawyers and the chaos, Sarah and I took precautions. Lena's heart began to race as Miguel opened the cooler to reveal carefully preserved specimens of orchid Acacia magnificens, root systems intact, stored in specialized growing medium, not just samples, living plants, viable and protected. You saved them, she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. We saved what we could. It's not everything, but it's enough. Enough to continue your research. Enough to prove what you discovered. He handed her a flash drive. And Sarah made copies of all your documentation before they confiscated your equipment. Every photograph, every measurement, every analysis. It's all here. Tears streamed down Lena's face as she clutched the drive like a lifeline. Why? Why risk yourselves for this? Miguel's expression grew serious. Because my grandfather taught me that some knowledge is meant to be shared, not owned. Because you came to our forest with respect, not greed. Because you see plants as living teachers, not resources to exploit. He glanced at Alistair, still sleeping fitfully in the hospital bed. And because that man loves you enough to face death for something he believes in, that kind of love deserves to be honored, not destroyed. The sound of Miguel's voice pulled Alistair from sleep. He blinked, disoriented, then focused on the scene before him. Lena crying, Miguel smiling, and between them the impossible reality of hope resurrected. "What's happening?" Alistair asked, his voice rough from disuse. "We have a second chance," Lena said, moving to his bedside and taking his hand. "Miguel saved specimens. Sarah preserved our data. Marcus thinks he's won, but he only has empty plants and stolen equipment. The real knowledge, the actual research, it's still ours." Alistair struggled to process this information, his medicated mind working slowly. "But the legal claims, the accusations, are built on lies," Miguel interjected. "And lies, Senor Vance, have a way of collapsing when confronted with truth. My community is prepared to testify to what actually happened, to confirm your respect for our land and our people, to expose Marcus Croft's tactics for what they are, theft disguised as legitimate business." "It won't be enough," Alistair said, years of business experience tempering his hope. "Marcus has too much power, too many resources. He has money," Lena corrected, her voice gaining strength. "We have truth. We have evidence. We have people who believe in what we're doing." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with renewed determination. "And we have something he'll never understand. We're not fighting for profit. We're fighting because it's right." Over the next hours, as doctors bustled in and out checking Alistair's vital signs and adjusting his medications, they began to plan, not with the desperate energy of their initial expedition, but with the focused calm of people who understood exactly what they were fighting for and what they were willing to risk. Sarah joined them via video call, her face appearing on Lena's laptop screen with barely contained excitement. "I've been reaching out to contacts in the environmental community. Once they understand what Marcus is really doing, how he's violating indigenous rights and exploiting protected resources, they'll have to respond." "We need more than environmental activists," Alistair said, his strategic mind engaging despite his physical weakness. "We need media attention. We need to make this story too big for Marcus to bury with lawyers and money." "I might be able to help with that," said a new voice from the hospital room doorway. They turned to see a woman in her early 40s, professionally dressed, with a journalist's assessing gaze and a recorder openly displayed in her hand. "Elena Martinez, investigative reporter for the Washington Post. I've been following Marcus Croft's business practices for 2 years. When I heard about this Costa Rica situation, I knew it fit his pattern." Lena stood, immediately defensive. "How did you find us?" "Miguel contacted me. We've worked together before on stories about corporate exploitation of indigenous lands." Elena stepped into the room, her demeanor respectful but determined. "I want to tell your story. The real story, not the version Marcus is selling to the world." "And why should we trust you?" Alistair asked, his voice carrying the weight of recent betrayal. "Because I don't work for Marcus Croft, because I've spent my career exposing people like him, and because—" Elena's expression softened, "because I believe some stories need to be told, regardless of the personal cost." Lena looked at Alistair, a silent question passing between them. They had been burned by trusting the wrong people, but they had also been saved by trusting the right ones. This was a leap of faith, but then again, their entire journey had been built on faith. "Tell us what you need," Lena said. Eleanor pulled out a chair, settling in with the ease of someone preparing for a long interview. "I need everything, the full story, from the beginning. I need to understand not just what happened, but why it matters." Why this orchid is worth fighting for. Why you're willing to risk everything for it. So they told her. Alistair spoke of his diagnosis, of the emptiness that had consumed him until he found purpose in Lena's research. Lena described a decade of being dismissed and doubted, of maintaining faith in theories no one else believed. Together, they painted a picture of discovery and love, of corporate greed attempting to destroy scientific integrity, of an indigenous community protecting knowledge while welcoming respectful inquiry. Elena's recorder captured every word, but more importantly, her eyes captured the emotional truth beneath the facts. When Alistair described his first heart episode in the jungle, when Lena spoke of finding the orchid at dawn, when Miguel recounted his grandfather's teachings about the forest as a living teacher, Elena didn't just hear their words, she understood their meaning. This is bigger than just one plant or one pharmaceutical patent, Elena said when they finished, her voice thoughtful. This is about what kind of world we want to live in. One where everything has a price tag and the highest bidder wins, or one where some things are too precious to be owned, where knowledge is shared and nature is respected? Exactly, Lena breathed. That's exactly it. Then that's the story I'll tell. Elena stood, gathering her equipment. But I need to warn you, Marcus will fight back. He has resources I can't match. Once this article publishes, things are going to get much worse before they get better. Let them, Alistair said, and despite his physical frailty, his voice carried steel. I'm dying anyway. I'd rather die fighting for something that matters than fade away quietly while evil men profit from theft. Elena nodded, respect clear in her expression. I'll need a few days to write this properly, to fact-check everything, to build a case he can't tear down. In the meantime, prepare yourselves. The storm is coming. After she left, the room fell into contemplative silence. Outside, the Costa Rican sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Alistair watched the colors shift and change, aware that each sunset brought him closer to his last one, but finding unexpected peace in that knowledge. Are you afraid? Lena asked quietly, still holding his hand. Of dying? No. I've made my peace with that. He turned to look at her, memorizing every detail of her face in the fading light. I'm afraid of leaving you, of not being here to see you vindicated, to watch you prove all those skeptics wrong. I'm afraid you'll forget how extraordinary you are. I could never forget, she said, because you see me clearly. You see not just the scientist, but the woman. Not just the research, but the passion driving it. You see all of me, Alistair, and you love all of me. That kind of seeing, that kind of loving. It doesn't end just because your heart stops beating. They kissed, gentle and bittersweet. A kiss that acknowledged both the love they shared and the inevitable separation approaching. When they parted, Lena rested her head on his shoulder, and they watched the sunset together, two people stealing moments of peace before the battle to come. Whatever happens, Alistair said, whatever Marcus throws at us, whatever the outcome of all this fighting, I want you to know that these months with you have been the most alive I've ever felt. You gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. What's that? A reason to want more time. For years, I've been counting down to death with apathy, maybe even relief. But now, his voice caught, now I want every extra minute, every stolen hour. Because every moment with you is precious beyond measure. Lena's tears fell silently, dampening his hospital gown. Then we'll make every moment count. However many we have left, we'll fill them with meaning and purpose and love. We'll fight Marcus Croft. We'll protect the orchid. We'll tell the truth so loudly that the whole world has to listen. And when your heart finally gives out, you'll know that you didn't just leave a legacy. You lived one. As night fell completely and the hospital settled into its nocturnal rhythms, they remained together, drawing strength from shared presence. Tomorrow, the war would intensify. Tomorrow they would face Marcus Croft's retribution with everything they had. But tonight they had each other. Tonight they had hope. And tonight, surrounded by the specimens Miguel had saved and the data Sarah had preserved, they had proof that love and integrity could survive even the most devastating attacks. The battle was far from over. But for the first time since Marcus's helicopters had descended on their camp, they believed they could actually win. The article dropped like a bomb. Elena Martinez's investigation ran on the front page of the Washington Post's digital edition, complete with photographs of Orchidaceae magnificens, testimonials from Miguel's community, and a devastating breakdown of Marcus Croft's pattern of biopiracy across 3 continents. The headline was simple but devastating: "The billion-dollar theft. How one man's greed threatens indigenous knowledge and scientific discovery." Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. By the next morning, it had gone viral. Alistair watched the metrics climb from his hospital bed, his laptop propped on his knees, Sarah providing real-time updates via video call. Environmental organizations were issuing statements. Legal experts were weighing in. The Costa Rican government was announcing investigations, and Marcus Croft's carefully constructed narrative was crumbling under the weight of documented truth. "It's working," Sarah said, her excitement barely contained. "People are seeing through his lies. They're understanding what he really is." But Alistair knew Marcus well enough to understand that cornered predators were most dangerous. The response, when it came, was swift and vicious. Marcus's lawyers filed defamation suits against Eleanor, the newspaper, and everyone involved in the article. They released their own carefully edited documentation, showing carefully staged photographs of Alistair and Lena with equipment, spinning a narrative of wealthy dilettantes playing at science while exploiting local communities. They leaked Alistair's medical records, painting him as a desperate dying man, willing to do anything for a legacy, manipulating a naive scientist for his own ego. The attacks were personal, cruel, and devastatingly effective. For every person the article convinced, Marcus's machine sowed doubt in 10 others. Lena absorbed each attack with visible pain, but she didn't break. Instead, she channeled her anguish into action, using the specimens Miguel had saved. Working 16-hour days in a borrowed university lab, she pushed forward with her research. Each breakthrough she achieved was immediately documented and shared publicly, demonstrating the scientific validity of her theories in real time. Sarah became her digital warrior, using social media to create a grassroots movement. Guardians of the forest began trending, with people around the world sharing stories about the importance of protecting indigenous knowledge and respecting natural resources. Scientists who had dismissed Lena's work began speaking out in her defense. Students organized protests outside Croft Industries' offices, but the toll was visible. Lena lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Dark circles appeared beneath her eyes that no amount of rest could erase. She was fighting on multiple fronts: the legal battle, the public relations war, the scientific research, and the emotional devastation of watching Alistair grow weaker with each passing day. 10 days after Elena's article published, Alistair had another severe episode. This one was worse than the previous attacks, leaving him so weak he could barely lift his head from the pillow. The doctors were blunt. His heart was failing faster than expected. Days, they said, maybe a week if he was lucky. Lena refused to leave his side. She conducted video calls from his hospital room, analyzed data on her laptop while holding his hand, fought their battles while watching the man she loved slip away bit by bit. "You need to rest," Alistair told her during one of his more lucid moments. "You're going to make yourself sick." "I'm fine," she lied, and they both knew it was a lie. "Lena," he struggled to sit up, and she immediately moved to help him. "Listen to me, please. This fight, it's consuming you, and I understand why. I understand the need to prove yourself, to defeat Marcus, to vindicate everything you've worked for. But he took her hand, his grip weak, but determined. But I need you to promise me something, anything. When I'm gone, I need you to let go of the anger, let go of the need for revenge. Marcus Croft is a small, petty man who will ultimately destroy himself. Don't let him destroy you in the process. Don't let fighting him become your whole life. I don't know how to stop fighting, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. Fighting is all I've ever done. Fighting for respect, fighting for funding, fighting to be heard. How do I just stop? You don't stop fighting for what's right. You stop fighting from a place of anger and hurt. You fight from love instead, from hope, from the belief that the world can be better, not from the need to punish those who make it worse. He pulled her down beside him on the narrow hospital bed, wrapping his arm around her despite his weakness. Promise me, Lena. Promise me you'll find peace. She wanted to promise, wanted to give him that comfort. But honesty had always been the foundation of their relationship, and she couldn't betray that now, even to ease his dying. I promise to try, she said instead. I promise that when this is over, when you're gone, I'll find a way to transform this pain into something beautiful, something that would make you proud. I'm already proud of you, he whispered. So incredibly proud. They fell asleep like that, tangled together in the hospital bed, nurses tactfully ignoring the violation of regulations. When Lena woke hours later, Alistair was still sleeping, his breathing shallow but steady, and she allowed herself to imagine a world where he could simply keep breathing forever. But the fantasy shattered when her phone rang. It was Tom Rivera, Alistair's doctor, but he wasn't calling about Alistair's condition. Lena, you need to turn on the news. Now! She carefully extricated herself from Alistair's embrace and found the remote. The news was devastating. Croft Industries had just announced they were abandoning their Costa Rica operations, citing unforeseen environmental complications and indigenous rights concerns. Marcus was spinning it as a responsible business decision, claiming he had always intended to respect local communities and protect natural resources. It was a masterful retreat. By pulling out before formal investigations could prove wrongdoing, he avoided legal consequences. By framing it as environmental consciousness, he salvaged his public image. And by abandoning the project entirely, he ensured that no one else could access the resources either. If he couldn't profit from the orchid, no one would. Lena felt rage building, hot and consuming. He was escaping, getting away with everything. And there was nothing she could do to stop him. Lena? Alistair's voice was weak but alert. What's wrong? She told him, watching his face as he processed the news, expecting anger, expecting frustration. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like relief. Don't you understand? She demanded. He's winning. He's getting away with it. Is he? Alistair asked quietly. Think about it, Lena. Really think. What did Marcus want from all of this? The orchid, the patent, the profit. And what did he get? She paused, actually considering the question. Nothing. Legal problems. Bad publicity. Empty plants without the knowledge to use them. Exactly. He wanted to defeat me one last time, to prove he was smarter and more powerful. Instead, he exposed his own tactics, damaged his reputation, and retreated in what everyone will recognize as defeat, no matter how he spins it. Alistair smiled, and despite his physical deterioration, it was genuine. We didn't just survive his attack, Lena. We won. Maybe not in the way we expected, but we won nonetheless. But the orchid is still here. You have specimens. You have data. You have the knowledge he could never steal because it exists in your brilliant mind. You can continue the research properly, ethically, in partnership with Miguel's community. You can publish findings that will help people without any corporation controlling the patents. You've lost nothing that actually mattered. And Marcus has lost the only thing he cared about, his victory over me." Lena sank into the chair beside his bed, the fight draining out of her as understanding dawned. Alistair was right. They had won. Not perfectly, not completely, but meaningfully. The orchid would be studied. The truth was known. Indigenous rights were protected, and Marcus Croft had been exposed for what he was. "How are you so calm about this?" she asked. "How can you face death and defeat and betrayal with such peace?" "Because I've learned something in these past months that you taught me, whether you knew it or not." He reached for her hand. "I've learned that winning isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about staying true to yourself. It's about fighting for what's right, even when you can't see the outcome. It's about love prevailing. Not through force, but through persistence and faith and the refusal to let darkness extinguish your light." He paused, gathering his strength for what he needed to say. "Marcus Croft spent his whole life accumulating power and wealth, and he has nothing but emptiness to show for it. I spent 3 years learning to live fully, to love completely, to fight for something that mattered. I may be dying, Lena, but I'm the one who won. Because I found you, because I found purpose, because I found out what it means to be truly, beautifully alive." The words broke something open in Lena's chest, and she wept. Not tears of sadness, though grief was there. Not tears of anger, though frustration remained. These were tears of recognition, of understanding, of accepting a truth she had been fighting against since the moment she met Alistair Vance. This wasn't a tragedy, it was a love story. And love stories, the real ones, the ones that mattered, didn't end with happily ever after. They ended with transformation, with growth, with the knowledge that loving and being loved, even for a short time, was worth any amount of pain that followed. "I love you," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "I love you too," he replied, "and that's why I need you to do something for me. One final thing, anything. I need you to let me go public with my story, all of it, the terminal diagnosis, the expedition, the love, the fight against Marcus, everything." His eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. "I need the world to know what you've accomplished, what you've endured, what you've proven. I need my death to mean something beyond just me. I need it to be part of your story, your victory, your legacy. Alistair, please, let me do this. Let me use the last days I have to make sure everyone knows the truth. Not Marcus's version, not some sanitized corporate narrative, the real story of a dying man who found life, a brilliant scientist who changed everything, and a love that transformed them both." She wanted to refuse, wanted to keep their story private and sacred, but she saw the need in his eyes, understood what he was offering, his final gift to her, his last act of love. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay," he smiled, peace settling over his features. "Thank you." Within an hour, they had drafted the statement together, Alistair's words and Lena's scientific precision, creating something powerful and true. They sent it to Elena Martinez, who promised to handle it with the care it deserved. The article would publish the next day, and when it did, the world would finally understand what Lena had always known. That Alistair Vance's greatest achievement wasn't the billions he'd accumulated, but the love he'd found and the purpose he'd discovered in his final months. That night, as Alistair slept peacefully for the first time in days, Lena sat beside him and let herself imagine the future. A future without him, which was almost unbearable to contemplate. But also a future where his sacrifice would mean something, where the orchid would help people, where love and science and truth would triumph over greed and cruelty. It wasn't the ending she wanted, but it was the ending they had, and she would make it count, for him, for them, for everything they had built together. Elena Martinez's article about Alistair's confession broke the internet. The heart that gave everything, a dying billionaire's final act of love and defiance. The piece was masterful, weaving together Alistair's terminal diagnosis, his transformation from apathetic billionaire to passionate advocate, his love for Lena, and his ultimate sacrifice of reputation and resources to protect something he believed in. Elena didn't shy away from the medical details, the raw intimacy of watching someone die, or the fierce determination with which both Alistair and Lena had fought Marcus Croft's empire. Within hours, it had millions of shares. Guardians of the Forest exploded beyond anything Sarah had imagined possible. People weren't just reading the story, they were taking action. Donations poured in for Lena's research. Legal funds were established. Environmental organizations mobilized. The Costa Rican government announced full protection for the cloud forest region where Orchidaceae magnificens grew. And in a move that surprised everyone, several members of Marcus Croft's own board of directors issued a joint statement condemning his actions and demanding his resignation. Marcus tried to fight back, but the tide had turned irrevocably. His lawyer's aggressive tactics only made him look more guilty. His attempts to discredit Alistair and Lena backfired spectacularly, generating sympathy and support instead of doubt. Within a week, he announced his retirement from Croft Industries, though everyone recognized it for what it was, a humiliating defeat, but Alistair barely registered any of it. He was fading, his consciousness drifting in and out like waves on a shore, each retreat taking him further from the world he was leaving behind. Lena stayed with him constantly, her research abandoned for these final days. Sarah managed everything else, allowing Lena the precious gift of simply being present for the man she loved. Tom Rivera stopped by daily, no longer as a doctor but as a friend, sitting with them in comfortable silence, bearing witness to a love that transcended medical prognosis. And Miguel came, bringing blessings from his community, traditional prayers for smooth passage between worlds, and the quiet assurance that Alistair's fight had mattered, had made a difference, had honored the forest and its people. "The orchid blooms again," Miguel told Alistair during one of his lucid moments. "The specimens you protected, the research you fought for, it continues. You gave it life, Signor Vance. You gave all of us hope." Alistair managed a weak smile. "Lena did that. I just helped however I could." "You did more than help," Lena said, her hand entwined with his. "You believed, when no one else did, when the whole world dismissed my theories as fantasy. You believed. That belief gave me strength. It gave me courage. It gave me everything. I believed in you," he corrected gently. "That was the easiest thing I've ever done." The days blurred together, a haze of medication and sleep and brief windows of clarity. During those windows, Alistair and Lena talked about everything and nothing. She told him about the breakthrough in isolating the orchid's compounds. He told her about dreams he'd been having of the cloud forest, of walking through mist and light with her hand in his. "I'm not afraid," he told her one evening, his voice barely a whisper. "I thought thought the final moments would be terrifying, but I'm not afraid at all." Why not? She needed to know, needed to understand how he faced death with such peace, because I've already lived, really, truly lived. These months with you, Lena, they've been worth more than all the years that came before. Quality over quantity, love over time. You taught me that. She kissed him, soft and gentle, tasting salt from her own tears. You taught me too. You taught me that being seen, being truly known and loved is worth any risk, worth any pain, worth everything. Promise me something, he said, pulling back to look at her face, memorizing every detail. Another promise. The last one. I promise. He smiled at the unintended joke. Promise me you'll keep living fully, Keep chasing impossible dreams. Keep believing in things everyone else dismisses. Keep being exactly who you are, because you're extraordinary. I promise, she said, I promise to honor you by living the way you taught me, fearlessly, authentically, with my whole heart. That's all I need, he breathed. That's everything. The end, when it came, was peaceful. No dramatic final words, no last-minute crisis, just a gradual fading, like sunset giving way to night. Lena felt his hand go slack in hers, felt his chest rise one final time, and then go still. And she knew. Alistair Vance was gone. But not really, not truly, because everything he'd fought for continued. The orchid research, the protected forest, the legacy of love and courage that would inspire others long after his heart stopped beating. Tom Rivera pronounced him dead at 7:32 p.m. on a Thursday evening in early December. Sarah and Miguel stood with Lena, surrounding her with support as she said goodbye to the man who had changed her life. He was extraordinary, Sarah said quietly. He was just a man, Lena replied, her voice steady despite the tears. Just a man who chose to love completely and fight courageously and live authentically in the time he had, and that made him more extraordinary than any amount of wealth or power ever could. They held a small ceremony 3 days later. No lavish funeral befitting a billionaire, just a gathering of the people whose lives Alistair had touched, Tom and Sarah, Miguel and his community leaders, Elena Martinez and the scientists who had rallied to Lena's defense, and a handful of others who had been transformed by Alistair's final months. Eleanor delivered a eulogy that celebrated not what Alistair had been, but what he had become. Not the apathetic billionaire counting down to death, but the passionate advocate who had found purpose and love in his final chapter. But it was Lena who spoke last, standing before the gathered mourners with dry eyes and steady voice, transformed by grief into something stronger than sorrow. Alistair would hate me telling you this, she began, but when I first met him, I thought he was just another wealthy dilettante playing at science. I thought his money was the only thing he had to offer. I was wrong, so completely, utterly wrong. She paused, gathering her thoughts. What Alistair offered wasn't his wealth, though he used that generously. It wasn't his influence, though he wielded that courageously. What he offered was something far more precious. He offered belief, pure, unwavering, absolute belief in things he couldn't prove, in theories he couldn't test, in people he had no reason to trust. He believed in impossible orchids and revolutionary research, and a scientist everyone else had dismissed. But more than that, he believed in love, in connection, in the power of two people choosing each other despite all the logical reasons they shouldn't. Her voice grew stronger, carrying to every corner of the small chapel. The doctors gave him 3 years. They were wrong. Those 3 years became a lifetime because Alistair chose to fill them with meaning. He chose to live every moment fully, to love without reservation, to fight for what mattered regardless of the cost. And in doing so, he taught me what it means to be truly alive. She looked at the simple casket, at the man she'd loved lying still inside it. I'm not here to mourn Alistair Vance. I'm here to celebrate him, to honor him by continuing the work we started together, to prove that his belief in me, in us, in the impossible dream of love transforming everything, to prove that it was justified. Lena stepped forward, placing a single orchid on the casket. Orchidaceae magnificens, blooming despite the December cold, its petals bearing the pattern that resembled a human heart. The doctors gave you 3 years, she whispered, for his ears alone, though he could no longer hear. But you gave me forever. Thank you, Alistair, for everything, for believing, for loving, for teaching me that 3 years can be enough when they're filled with purpose and passion and the kind of love that transcends time itself. She stepped back, letting the others pay their respects, and allowed Miguel to guide her outside where the winter sun was setting in shades of gold and crimson. The same colors that had painted the Costa Rican sky the night Alistair had first told her he loved her. "What will you do now?" Miguel asked gently. Lena breathed in the cold December air and felt something settling in her chest. Not closure, exactly. Not an ending, but a transformation, a metamorphosis from one state of being to another. "I'll keep my promise," she said. "I'll continue the research. I'll prove that Alistair's sacrifice meant something. I'll honor him by living the way he taught me to live, fearlessly, authentically, with everything I have. And after that," she smiled, sad but genuine, "after that, I'll find new impossible things to believe in, new dreams to chase, new ways to make the world better, because that's what Alistair would want, not for me to grieve forever, but to transform this pain into purpose, this loss into legacy." Miguel nodded, understanding in his weathered face. "He loved you very much. I know, and I loved him. Still love him, actually. I don't think that stops just because someone dies." She looked back at the chapel where Alistair's body waited for cremation, for transformation into ash and memory. "Love doesn't end, Miguel. It just changes form, becomes something you carry instead of something you share. But it's still love, still precious, still worth everything it cost." As the sun set completely and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Lena made a decision. Tomorrow, she would announce the creation of the Vance Petrova Foundation, dedicated to funding research that bridged indigenous knowledge and modern science. She would establish the Cloud Forest Sanctuary, protecting Orchidaceae magnificens and countless other species from exploitation. She would publish her findings, sharing them freely with the world, ensuring that Alistair's investment in her research would benefit humanity, not enrich corporations. But tonight, she would simply remember. She would hold close the memory of a man who had found her when she was lost, who had believed in her when she was doubted, who had loved her when she was alone. She would honor him by feeling the full weight of her grief, knowing that such profound sorrow was only possible because their love had been equally profound. The doctors had given him 3 years. But Alistair Vance had given the world something far more valuable. He had given them proof that love could transform anything, that purpose could emerge from the most unexpected places, and that a life measured not in years but in meaning could be richer than any fortune. And he had given Lena Petrova the greatest gift of all. He had shown her that she was worthy of being loved exactly as she was. Brilliant and stubborn and passionate and impossibly determined to chase dreams no one else could see. That gift would last forever. 1 year later, on the anniversary of Alistair's death, Lena returned to Costa Rica. Not to the hospital in San Jose where he had died, but to the cloud forest where they had found love and orchids and purpose intertwined. Miguel met her at the base camp, which had been transformed into a permanent research station. The Vance Petrova Foundation had funded it, creating jobs for the local community, providing resources for scientists from around the world, and establishing a model for how conservation could benefit everyone involved. "Doctora," Miguel greeted her with a warm embrace. "Welcome home. Home. Yes, that's what this place had become. Not the apartment in Boston where she technically lived, not the university where she now held an endowed chair funded by Alistair's estate, but here, in the forest where everything had changed, where she had learned what it meant to love and be loved without reservation. "How are the specimens?" she asked, falling into familiar patterns of conversation. "Thriving. We have 17 mature plants now, and Sarah's propagation protocols are working beautifully. The compound isolation is proceeding exactly as you predicted." Miguel smiled. "You were right, Doctora, about everything. The alkaloids, the cardiac applications, the potential for regeneration rather than just symptom management. The clinical trials are showing remarkable results." Lena felt tears pricking her eyes. A year ago, this news would have devastated her. The bitter irony of success coming too late to save Alistair. But she had done her grieving, had moved through anger and sorrow to something more complex. Acceptance tinged with gratitude for the time they'd had. "He would be so proud," she said. "He is proud," Miguel corrected gently. "Love like that doesn't end with death, Doctora. It continues, watching over us, guiding us forward." They hiked to the site where Orchidaceae magnificens had first been discovered, where Lena had wept tears of vindication and Alistair had seen the culmination of his faith. The area was protected now, a designated sanctuary where the orchids grew undisturbed except for careful, ethical research. And there, growing from the exact spot where Lena had found that first specimen, was something remarkable. 3 new orchids had bloomed, their flowers more spectacular than any she had documented before. The patterns on their petals seemed almost deliberate, forming shapes that looked uncannily like hearts intertwined. "Nature's poetry," Miguel said softly. "The forest remembers those who loved her, who protected her, who gave everything to ensure her survival." Lena knelt before the orchids, tears flowing freely now. 1 year. It had been 1 year since she'd held Alistair's hand as he slipped away. 1 year since she'd promised to honor him by living fully. 1 year of keeping that promise, of transforming grief into purpose, of proving that his belief in her had been justified. The research was thriving, the foundation was changing lives, the sanctuary was protected. Marcus Croft had faded into obscurity, his empire diminished, his reputation permanently tarnished. Justice had been served, not through revenge, but through the simple act of continuing the work, of proving that love and integrity ultimately triumphed over greed and cruelty. "I kept my promise," Lena whispered to the orchids, to the forest, to Alistair's memory. "I lived, I fought, I believed in impossible things. And it all came true, just like you said it would." She pulled out her field journal, the same one she'd carried throughout their expedition, now filled with a year's worth of additional observations and breakthroughs. On a fresh page, she wrote, "Year 1 without you, year 1 of everything we built together. The orchid blooms, the research succeeds, love persists. You were right, Alistair. 3 years was enough. Because we filled them so completely that they overflow into all my remaining years. I carry you with me in every discovery, every breakthrough, every moment of wonder. The doctors gave you 3 years. You gave me forever. Thank you for everything, forever and always, Lena." She closed the journal and stood, breathing in the forest air, feeling the life pulsing around her. Sarah would arrive tomorrow with the latest research data. Elena was preparing a follow-up article about the Foundation's first year of success. Tom had called to share news of the first patients showing improvement in clinical trials. The work continued, life continued, and somewhere in the interweaving of past and present, grief and joy, loss and legacy, Lena felt something she hadn't experienced in the year since Alistair's death: peace. Not the peace of forgetting or moving on, but the peace of honoring, of knowing that every breath she took, every dream she chased, every impossible thing she proved possible, was a tribute to the man who had believed in her absolutely. Miguel touched her shoulder gently. "It's time to go, Doctora. The others are waiting at the camp. They want to hear about your latest findings." "Yes," Lena said, taking one last look at the orchids. "I'm ready." As they walked back through the forest, Lena felt lighter than she had in months. The grief would always be there, a permanent part of her landscape, but it was no longer the only thing she carried. She also carried love and hope, and the absolute certainty that what she and Alistair had built together would outlast them both. The sun was setting as they reached the camp, painting the sky in those familiar shades of gold and crimson. Lena paused, watching the light play across the clouds, and allowed herself a small smile. "The doctors gave you 3 years, Alistair," she whispered to the evening air, "but you gave me a lifetime, and I'm going to make it count, I promise, for both of us." The forest seemed to respond. A gentle breeze rustling through the leaves, carrying with it the scent of orchids and earth, and life continuing in all its messy, beautiful complexity. And somewhere in that breeze, in the fading light, in the eternal cycle of growth and decay and renewal, Lena could almost feel him. Not gone, never truly gone, just transformed, like energy changing states, like love transcending physical boundaries. Alistair Vance had died, but everything he had lived for continued, would ripple outward through time in ways neither of them could have imagined. That was his legacy, their legacy. A love story written not in years, but in meaning, not in quantity, but in quality, not in length, but in depth. 3 years had been enough, because they had made them enough, and that, Lena knew with absolute certainty, was the greatest victory of all. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.